talking about here on my channel right now. It's all about
What was supposed to be the calm ending to one of Hollywood's ugliest legal battles suddenly exploded into another round of chaos, accusations, media leaks, and public mudslinging. Just when everyone thought the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni drama had finally cooled off after reports of a settlement agreement, the situation somehow became even more dramatic. The legal paperwork may have been moving toward closure, but the war of public narratives clearly was not over. And according to people close to the situation, tensions behind the scenes were still boiling hotter than ever. Lashari opened the latest Coravanta segment sounding genuinely exhausted by the endless cycle of updates. He admitted he thought the story was finally winding down for the weekend, only for another wave of statements, accusations, and media reports to flood social media within hours. At this point, the conflict had evolved far beyond a normal celebrity disagreement. It had become a full-scale public relations war where every sentence, every legal filing, and every interview was being weaponized by both camps in an attempt to shape public opinion. The latest controversy began after Blake Lively's legal team issued a statement following settlement discussions. Instead of sounding calm or neutral, the statement came across as aggressive and confrontational. Her lawyers claimed that Justin Baldoni and the other defendants had abused the legal system in an effort to intimidate and silence her. The statement also framed the settlement as a form of accountability against Baldoni's side, suggesting that the defendants were now facing personal liability because they waived their right to appeal. The reaction online was immediate. Legal commentators, entertainment reporters, and even casual observers were stunned by the tone of the statement because, according to reports, both sides had just participated in a joint settlement agreement intended to de-escalate tensions and move forward. Usually, after settlements, both parties either remain silent or issue carefully crafted statements aimed at reducing conflict. Instead, this felt like someone pouring gasoline on a fire that had barely started cooling down. Lashari pointed out what many legal analysts were already discussing. Throughout the legal process, Blake's team had aggressively pursued subpoenas, requests for records, and broad investigations into Baldoni's professional and personal communications. Critics of Blake's strategy argued that many of those legal tactics resembled fishing expeditions designed to uncover damaging material rather than directly support the original claims. Some observers even described parts of the legal campaign as overly theatrical, arguing that the strategy focused heavily on media optics instead of courtroom strength. That is why Blake's latest statement struck so many people as bizarre. To critics, it sounded like someone accusing the other side of exactly what they themselves had been accused of doing throughout the case. Legal experts following the situation reportedly reacted with disbelief because settlements are normally intended to end public hostility, not restart it. But things escalated even further when Justin Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, responded publicly. TMZ quickly published comments from Friedman that completely reframed the settlement narrative. According to him, Blake Lively did not settle because she had achieved victory. Instead, he argued that she settled because she was afraid to testify under oath in open court. That accusation immediately changed the tone of the conversation online because it implied that Blake feared cross-examination and scrutiny more than she wanted a courtroom battle. Friedman's comments were sharp, direct, and unusually aggressive for a lawyer discussing an active settlement. He claimed Blake became nervous about taking the witness stand after contradictions allegedly emerged during depositions and evidence reviews. One issue receiving particular attention involved allegations surrounding deleted production footage and communications connected to Sony executives. According to reports discussed by Lashari, a Sony executive allegedly stated that Blake requested certain dailies be deleted, while Blake reportedly denied making such a request during sworn testimony. On the surface, some people dismissed the contradiction as minor, arguing that misunderstandings happen all the time in complicated productions. But legal observers noted that inconsistencies under oath can become extremely serious because they damage credibility. In a high-profile case built heavily around public trust and competing narratives, credibility was everything. Friedman reportedly used this contradiction as proof that Blake's case was weaker than her public statements suggested. He did not stop there. He also referenced testimony involving author Colleen Hoover, claiming Blake denied asking Hoover to unfollow Baldoni on social media, while Hoover allegedly testified that Blake had indeed made that request. Again, the issue itself might seem small to outsiders. Social media follows and unfollows are not exactly courtroom bombshells. But in a case centered around influence, pressure, and manipulation behind the scenes, even seemingly trivial details started taking on symbolic importance. Every contradiction became ammunition. Then came the line that immediately spread across entertainment blogs and social media accounts. Friedman reportedly said, "Blake filed a claim for $300 million and ended up with nothing. If this is victory, what does defeat look like?" That quote exploded online because it directly attacked Blake's framing of the settlement as some kind of moral triumph. Instead of treating the resolution as balanced or mutual, Baldoni's side was openly declaring total victory. Friedman pushed even harder by questioning Blake's public positioning throughout the case. He argued that if she truly believed she was standing up for survivors of harassment and retaliation, she should have testified publicly and proven her claims in court rather than settling before trial. The implication was obvious. Baldoni's team wanted the public to believe Blake abandoned the fight because the evidence would not support her accusations under courtroom scrutiny. Blake's legal team fired back almost immediately, reportedly telling TMZ, "I guess he's no longer ecstatic about the settlement." That single sentence reignited the conflict entirely. Instead of cooling tensions, both sides were now openly mocking each other through media outlets. It started to resemble less of a legal settlement and more of an endless celebrity PR war where every statement existed purely to score points online. Lashari sounded almost stunned while discussing the situation. From his perspective, once both parties reached a settlement agreement, the logical move would have been silence. Lay low. Move on. Let the public lose interest naturally. But instead, both camps appeared obsessed with controlling the final narrative. And that narrative battle mattered enormously because public perception could shape future careers. For Blake Lively, maintaining the image of a woman standing up against misconduct was critical. Her supporters viewed her as someone challenging toxic behavior within Hollywood systems. Walking away without framing the outcome as a victory could weaken that image. For Justin Baldoni, however, the stakes were equally high. His reputation, career, future projects, and public identity had all been dragged into months of controversy. If the legal claims against him collapsed or settled weakly, his team clearly wanted the world to understand that he believed he had been falsely accused and unfairly targeted. According to Lashari, different media organizations were now presenting the same events in completely different ways depending on which sources they prioritized. Some framed the settlement as Blake protecting herself and preserving dignity. Others framed it as Baldoni defeating exaggerated accusations. The same facts were being interpreted through radically different lenses. Then another layer of confusion emerged. Entertainment commentator Zach Peter reportedly received a longer statement from Friedman that TMZ either shortened or did not publish in full. In that version, Baldoni's attorney sounded even more triumphant. Friedman declared the outcome a total victory for Baldoni's side, emphasizing that many of Blake's original claims had already been dismissed by the court before settlement discussions even intensified. According to him, major harassment and defamation allegations had already collapsed legally, and the remaining claims were voluntarily dropped. That distinction mattered because it shifted the narrative from mutual settlement to case falling apart before trial. Friedman also reportedly argued that the only unresolved issue involved a narrow request for legal fees dating back months. In his view, the settlement happened because Blake's side knew they were unlikely to succeed in court. Whether people agreed with that interpretation or not, one thing became clear. Baldoni's team had absolutely no intention of allowing Blake to publicly dominate the narrative uncontested. Lashari repeatedly questioned why Blake's camp chose to issue such an aggressive statement after settlement discussions if the goal truly was peace. He argued that, from a strategic perspective, the smarter move would have been to quietly disappear from public discussion for a while instead of reigniting media warfare. But celebrity legal battles rarely operate purely on legal logic anymore. Reputation is currency. Public perception can influence brand partnerships, casting decisions, interviews, sponsorships, and future projects. In Hollywood, narrative management sometimes becomes just as important as courtroom results. And according to insiders speaking with Las Hari, this story was probably far from over. Sources allegedly while the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni controversy continued dominating entertainment headlines, the Corvana discussion suddenly shifted toward another story centered around public conflict, media pressure, and escalating tensions, this time involving President Donald Trump and the growing crisis surrounding Iran. Las Hari connected the two situations through one common idea. Both involved people desperately searching for an exit ramp from chaos, while simultaneously making everything worse with aggressive rhetoric and public escalation. The comparison may have sounded unusual at first, but the point he was making became clear. In both cases, public figures appeared unable to simply de-escalate. Every opportunity for calm somehow transformed into another cycle of confrontation. According to Las Hari, the international situation had become deeply unstable after military exchanges between the United States and Iran intensified. Reports circulated about bombings near Iranian ports, retaliation threats, and ongoing negotiations that seemed confusing even to political analysts trying to follow them. President Trump publicly insisted ceasefire discussions were progressing well, yet his language during press appearances sounded anything but calm. In one especially controversial moment, Trump warned that if agreements were not signed, Iran could face devastating consequences, including language many critics described as reckless and dangerously extreme. The contradiction immediately stood out to reporters. On one hand, the administration claimed negotiations were moving positively. On the other hand, the president's rhetoric sounded openly threatening. That disconnect fueled confusion and criticism. Las Hari argued that the broader issue reflected a pattern of escalation driven by pride, image, and refusal to back down publicly. He compared it to the celebrity legal drama because in both situations, nobody seemed capable of quietly accepting compromise. Every statement became performative. The conversation then moved toward rising gas prices and growing economic concerns tied to the conflict. Las Hari described the situation as one of the most avoidable modern crises imaginable because, in his view, aggressive decisions and emotional reactions had pushed tensions into dangerous territory. Reporters pressed Trump about why he appeared focused on unrelated symbolic projects while international conflict intensified. Specifically, one journalist questioned him about attention being given to cleanup and restoration projects around national monuments while global instability and rising fuel costs affected ordinary Americans. Trump responded defensively, emphasizing beauty, cleanliness, patriotism, and restoration of public spaces around landmarks like the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. He described truckloads of garbage being removed from water areas near monuments and argued that maintaining national beauty reflected American greatness. The exchange quickly turned combative. Trump criticized the reporter's question itself, calling it foolish and implying the journalist failed to appreciate the importance of maintaining public spaces. Rather than directly addressing concerns about economic pressure and war tensions, he focused heavily on defending the cleanup efforts. Las Hari reacted with disbelief to the exchange. In his view, the problem was not that monuments should remain dirty or neglected. The issue was priorities. Critics expected presidential focus on diplomacy, economic concerns, and military risks, not extended arguments about pond maintenance during an international crisis. The moment became even more controversial after the press conference ended. As reporters moved away, some viewers online believed Trump muttered an insult directed at the journalist who questioned him. Clips immediately spread across social media with users debating exactly what had been said. Some insisted he used a vulgar insult. Others argued the audio was unclear and people were exaggerating. But regardless of the exact wording, the moment added fuel to the growing perception of hostility between the administration and the press. Las Hari observed that modern political communication often mirrors celebrity scandals now. Everything becomes clipped into viral moments, debated endlessly online, and filtered through partisan interpretations. People no longer consume events collectively. Instead, they experience entirely different realities depending on which clips, headlines, and commentators they trust. That same phenomenon had already consumed the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni conflict. One side saw Blake as courageous. Another side saw her as manipulative. One side saw Baldoni as unfairly targeted. Another side saw him as hiding behind media strategy. The truth became harder to isolate because every piece of information arrived wrapped inside someone's agenda. The internet intensified everything. Small details became massive controversies overnight. A deleted follow on social media turned into evidence of manipulation. A contradictory statement became proof of lying. A settlement became either surrender or triumph depending on who explained it. And once audiences emotionally committed to one side, changing minds became nearly impossible. Lasshari reflected on how modern media ecosystems reward outrage over nuance. Calm analysis rarely goes viral.
Explosive accusations do.
That reality pushes public figures toward more dramatic behavior because attention itself becomes currency. Blake's team likely understood that framing the settlement aggressively would energize supporters and preserve her public image. Baldoni's team likely understood that publicly attacking the credibility of her claims would strengthen his own comeback narrative. Neither side appeared interested in ambiguity. Instead, each wanted a definitive moral victory. But real life rarely works that cleanly. Legal settlements especially are usually messy compromises where neither side fully wins and neither side fully loses. Yet celebrity culture often demands simpler stories. Hero versus villain, truth versus lies, innocence versus guilt. That pressure transforms complicated disputes into public spectacles. Lasshari also discussed the psychological impact prolonged public controversies can have on celebrities themselves. Regardless of who people support, constant scrutiny affects everyone involved. Months of headlines, accusations, legal filings, social media attacks, leaked stories, and endless commentary create enormous pressure. For Blake Lively, the controversy threatened years of carefully built public goodwill. For Justin Baldoni, it threatened both reputation and career direction simultaneously. Every interview, statement, and appearance now carried enormous weight. According to sources Lasshari referenced, Baldoni's inner circle believed he eventually needed to speak publicly not simply to defend himself, but to reconnect emotionally with audiences who once viewed him positively. Silence may protect legally, but prolonged silence can sometimes allow others to define your identity permanently. At the same time, any public appearance carried risk. If Baldoni appeared too angry, critics would accuse him of bitterness. If he appeared too emotional, some might call it performance. If he attacked Blake directly, backlash could intensify instantly. The same applied to Blake. Every aggressive statement from her legal team energized supporters, while simultaneously alienating critics who felt the settlement should have ended public attacks. Managing perception had become almost impossible because audiences now interpreted everything through pre-existing loyalties. Lasshari believed the coming months would determine whether the controversy finally fades or evolves into something even larger through interviews, documentaries, podcasts, or additional leaks. Hollywood scandals rarely disappear immediately anymore. Digital culture preserves them forever. Every clip, deposition, screenshot, and statement remains searchable, repostable, and endlessly reanalyzed. Even years later, controversies can suddenly return the moment someone gives a new interview or launches a new project. That is why narrative control matters so much now. And right now, both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni were still fighting for it. As the Corvanta segment wrapped up, the mood felt less like a conclusion and more like the uneasy pause before another explosion. Settlement papers may have been filed, but emotionally and publicly, the conflict remained unresolved. The battle had moved beyond legal arguments. Now it was about legacy, reputation, and who the public chooses to believe once the noise finally settles. And judging by the non-stop stream of statements, leaks, interviews, and insider whispers, that moment of silence still seemed very far away.